Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Which is the New Black? By Dakota Cassidy. Narrated by Hollie Jackson. Chapter 1. Nope. Absolutely not, Bernice Sutton said, shaking her head from side to side as she gathered up the few personal belongings she'd accumulated since she'd been in Magic Abuse Prison, located in chilly Salem, Massachusetts. There was a long, disgusted sigh from a disembodied voice, the gravelly hiss warring with the flagrant tint to the words that followed. No, so hush, Bernie baby. So final. Why don't we start with a maybe, Pookie? Just a little one. I say we start with never. A big one, as in no chance in hell. Perfection! It gives me something to aspire to. I love a good challenge. This is not a challenge. I am not a challenge, and I've told you 100 times. I don't need a familiar. I don't think I even fully understand what a familiar is. In fact, now that I'm almost free, I still don't know what I am, or what I'm supposed to do about what I am. Why would I drag someone else along with me into the great unknown? God, this being a witch was all so confusing. Miss Fee Line, her self-appointed familiar and wannabe drag queen cat, appeared out of nowhere. 10 months and a various assortment of spells and wands later, and Fee's popping up out of thin air, an ability among several he possessed, still never failed to make her jump out of her skin. Fee swished his tail with the pink bow attached to it in indignation. You're not dragging me, Bernie. I go forth a willing participant in your witch journey. Bernie shook her head again. No. You can't come with me. That's that. Now go harass someone else. I hear Knuckles in Cell Block C had her boyfriend sneak in a can of salmon. Everybody's talking about it. I bet if you offered to wax her upper lip, she'd give you some. Fee hopped down off the small table that held Bernie's few toiletries and stretched his spine with a purr of satisfaction, reaching forward with his front paws. You know, Boo, I don't want to point out the obs, but... Oh, you do too. You love to point out the obvious. Fair enough, but you'd know what a familiar was if you'd shown up to all your classes. Baloney. She'd damn well been to all the classes. Every single crazy, mind-bending one. How to be a witch in 2015. How to navigate the muddy waters of necessary magic versus magic for personal gain. How to control the urge to shove your wand up someone's ass. She'd sat quietly in the back of the meeting room in the center of the prison, her hair hanging over her eyes, her hoodie from a borrowed jacket on her head, as she slouched in her chair like some weird outcast and listened to every how-to support group the prison offered on everything and anything witch-ish. She'd been to them all, and she still didn't understand how this had happened or how she'd landed here, with a bunch of women who claimed they were her people. A witch. She was a witch. Not like the Wicked Witch in Oz, but a white witch. It just didn't get any more CW network than that. Sure, it explained a lot of kooky mishaps in her 30 years of life to date, things she was still coming to terms with, but even after 10 months, it was proving a hard pill to swallow. Bernie narrowed her eyes at the black cat and tugged on his fluffy pink tutu. I did show up to all my classes. Every single one of them. You did not. Your luscious, curve-riddled body might have been there, but your mind was absolutely not in attendance, honey. That's probably because my mind was still blown. In fact, if you check the stall in the latrines by the mess hall, there are still bits of it scattered on the floor. You try showing up to anything with your mind when it's been blown to smithereens. Fee yawned, his sharp teeth gleaming as though he were bored with her constant protests. What part of you are a bona fide witch is so hard to grasp, Bernie girl? You've known for 10 months now. I'd think you'd be long past disbelief. 10 long months of reflecting on her life. A life she'd spent a good portion of in trouble. At school, at home, at all 15 of her eventual jobs. The last being a night security guard at a big law firm. Bernie pulled the 2 ends of her ponytail to tighten it. Well, it doesn't matter what I believe, now does it? I did my stint for the council, showed remorse, blah, blah, blah. I'm out. Alone. You hear me, Fee? Like a lone wolf. Ow! She howled into her drab gray surroundings. She didn't have time for Fee's nonsense today. Today was for fresh starts and moving forward. Oh, and figuring out how not to be a witch anymore. Cracking her knuckles, she took one last glance around her jail cell and blew out a breath of relief. Almost there, Bernie. Almost there. Fee hopped down off the table and onto Bernie's dismally thin jailhouse mattress, where he'd spent every night since she'd arrived, curled into a small ball of tulle and dollar store tiara. And I'm telling you, your journey's just gearing up. What's this journey your gums keep flapping about? There's no journey that includes you. I get to leave here today a free woman. And go back to what, Bernie? You can't go back to nothing. You have nothing. Shut up. Oh, girl. You better come on back from that trip you're taking at Delusions R Us now. Fee, save the fancy talk and get to the point. What do you know that I don't know? He rolled onto his back, his ebony fur glistening sleekly under the dim light. You don't really think once those cell doors open and that crazy-in queen at a beauty supply store wig sale Baba Yaga shows up and waves a magic wand that it's over, do you? This is exactly why you need me as your familiar. To guide your pathetic ass. Right. Familiars were a witch's advisor. Sort of like high school counselors. Only not. If all the crazy she'd been spoon-fed up to this point was true, witches often became great friends with their familiars. And Fee had been first in line to apply for the job. Bernie balled up the sheets from her cot and threw them in the bag that had magically appeared every 3 days at her cell door for dirty laundry since she'd arrived. As the hour of her release grew closer, her patience grew shorter. Just explain what you mean, Fee. Parole, honey. Parole. You don't just up and skip out of here as if those Kotex pad slippers were made for walking. You gotta do more time on the outside. Prove you're worthy. Community service. Atone, you know. That pulled Bernie up short. Parole? God, she should have listened more carefully in Redemption is the New Black class. But her fellow inmate, Chichi Gonzalez, had been far more interesting. Her story about polar ice caps and what had gotten her 5 years in magic abuse jail was more fascinating than anything that screw Halima could teach. Plus, Chichi had paid good commissary money for Bernie's special Kotex slippers. They'd lasted longer than Winnie Foster's had, according to Chichi. Winnie being the ultimate success story everyone referred to when talking about redemption. But this was bullshit. Atone? I did atone for something I wasn't even aware I did to begin with. Hell yes, I've done my time, buddy. Yes, I damn well have. I did the prison rotation like I was going for the convict gold. I worked in the laundry room for 3 hellish months with Big Sue Moses breathing down my neck while she practiced putting eyeshadow on me made out of baby oil and cigarette ashes for shit's sake. You have to admit, that concoction's pure genius, and it makes a hella smoky eye that lasts all night. I'm making a point, Fee. Sorry. Carry on. Bernie held up her red, chapped hands. See these? I peeled 1,000 potatoes if I peeled one in the kitchen, even under the hateful glare of one-eyed Lorraine, who, I might add, pads the orders for pudding, then sells the overage to the cell-dwelling nuts in here for a ridiculous price. So the hell I'm giving this bunch of crazy-face, pointy-hat-loving, wand-wielding dark overlords another second of my time. I did my 10 months, clean as a whistle. No isolation, no strikes, no backtalk. That means I'm out the second Baba Yaga decides to put on her leg warmers and show her freakishly age-defying face at that cell door, she scoffed, thumbing a finger over her shoulder. Fee hissed. Taking in a long breath, Bernie blew it out with a wince. She's behind me, isn't she? A tapping of nails on the cell bars made Bernie cringe. She is, and lucky for you, Bernice, today is Monday, which is ripped sweatshirt day, not leg warmer day. Thank you very much. Whipping around, Bernie was fully prepared to throw herself on a metaphoric sword and apologize in order to keep from doing any more time. Baba Yaga was the witch in charge of everything witch, and also the warden at Jailhouse Rock. She couldn't afford to piss her off, especially not on release day. Lifting her eyes, Bernie fought the urge to laugh out loud at Baba Yaga's latest outfit. She was an 80s fanatic, stuck somewhere between Rick Astley and Debbie Gibson, and sometimes her outlandish reproductions of Madonna, a la Like a Virgin, caught Bernie so off guard she had to cover her mouth with her hand to keep from snorting. Oh, come on, B.Y. Fee backed up Bernie. She's just got some release day jitters. She can't wait to get started on making things right. Isn't that so, Bernie? Bernie made her eyes round and thumper-like when she gazed into Baba's beautiful face. I'm sorry, Baba. It's my nerves. I promise to try to curb my tongue. Sometimes I speak out of turn when I'm frazzled. Baba adjusted the torn shoulder of her pink sweatshirt and gave Bernie that stern expression she dreaded. Sometimes you magic out of turn too, Bernice, which is why you're here in the first place, isn't it? Bernie fought a hard roll of her eyes. If she ever forgot she'd done something heinous, Baba Yaga was always 2 steps behind, reminding her she was a shitty witch. But she was determined to get the hell out of here at all costs. She didn't know what she was going to do once she sampled the sweet taste of freedom, but anything had to be better than being in here. Swallowing her pride, something else she'd done more times than she cared to count since her incarceration, Bernie let her eyes fall to her cell floor in contrition. You're right. I did do that. I'm sorry. Baba snapped her fingers, making the cell doors grind open until they clanked against the walls. Good to hear, inmate. Now, for your parole hearing. But first, Bernie'd like to thank you for her stay here. It's been beyond fabulous, right, Bernie? She's learned so much about being a good, unselfish witch. So much. Her pretty blonde head's spinning like the teacup ride at the fair, Fee said, jumping from the bed to the floor to wind his tail around Bernie's calves. If a cat could give side-eye, Fee was giving it to her, which meant shut up. In true applying for the job of familiar fashion, in the time since she'd been sentenced, Fee had doled out more than his fair share of witchly advice, whether she wanted it or not. Though in all honesty, he was usually right. Squaring her shoulders, Bernie nodded in silent agreement. Some freedom was better than no freedom. Instead of railing against parole, she turned off her thoughts about how unfair this all was and followed up with what Fee said. Baba's face wreathed in a smile, but it wasn't the kind of smile that said, good inmate. It was the kind that said, nice ass kissing. Baba crossed her arms over her chest, thinning her lips. Are you ready for your sentencing, inmate? Bernie cocked her head. Like, right here? Right now? What? No flickering lights and a circle of candles while the wind howls outside and all those old dudes without faces wearing rank-smelling robes mumble to each other? They're napping, Baba provided with an almost smile. Then she caught herself. Those old dudes without faces are your elders, Bernice. You do well to pay them some respect, especially on the day of your parole hearing, inmate. Fee swished his tail against Baba's legs, circling her. She just meant she was missing the ambiance of the old school hearings at council. You remember I told you about those, right, Bernie? You know, the hangings, the beheadings, the death by drop from atop Kilimanjaro into a pit of writhing snakes? Oh, yeah, those. Bernie gulped, tugging at the sleeves of her orange jumpsuit. I do, and yes, that's what I was referring to. I guess I just expected more. More pomp and circumstance, maybe? Like the more she'd encountered when she'd first been dragged to this place that from the outside was glamored to look like a quaint bed and breakfast, but was really protected by thick walls of magic? Like that big, long podium thingy, and all those faceless dudes who sat behind it as she looked up at them, their long, musty robes covering their bony limbs as she stood terrified before them. She was expecting the ominous but invisible hum of something electric, that strange noise that, out of fear, she'd jokingly asked if it belonged to one of the council's life support machines. Expecting the final sound of the gavel as it cracked on the top of the tall podium thingy when she was sentenced. That was what she expected now. Instead, there was nothing but the gloom of her dark prison cell with its sparse furnishings, and Baba glaring at her. Baba Yaga's eyes narrowed. You know, I can always wait until the elders are up from their nap, Bernice. We can put on the show you appear to crave if you'd like. Spooky ambiance, smelly robes and all. No, she shouted, then bit her lip and lowered her voice. I mean, no thank you, Baba Yaga. That's very kind, but I don't want to wake anyone. The council works hard, so hard. They need their rest. And deodorant. Baba Yaga sighed her irritation. You're a stubborn one, Bernice. And BTW, you're not fooling me. I know you haven't come to terms with the magnitude of what you've done yet. Not totally. But that's because you've run wild for far too long, like the word is hyphened on your name. How you slipped under the radar for all these years is beyond me. But we're going to fix that, as of now. These are the conditions of your parole, Bernice. Heed them. Condition 1. As Baba Yaga rambled on about the circumstances of her parole, Bernie pondered the word wild. Wild? God, that was so much bull and shit. She didn't even know she'd been out of control. In order to claim control, you had to know what you were controlling. Stuff just happened to her. Like things falling from the ceiling without warning whenever she was in a room full of people she felt uncomfortable with. Just a thought, and ugly rashes were known to break out on someone who'd angered her. Sometimes the rash turned into hives or big boils the size of quarters. Items moved without her saying a word, catapulting at the speed of light aimed directly for her mental victims. Those were just a few of the smaller incidents she'd experienced since she'd hit the age of 13. Unexplained occurrences that left her in a pile of shit at home, at school, at every job she'd ever had. But this last time? Whew. It had been the mother of all occurrences, and was exactly what had landed her here. As many times as she tried to explain she didn't even understand what was going on or how she made these things happen was the same number of times Baba Yaga and Bernie's fellow cellmates had cackled hysterically and mocked her thespian skills. The witches in Cell Block D had actually crafted a makeshift Academy Award out of a toilet paper roll, Q-tips, and glitter glue, handing it to her with much flourish in the cafeteria to gales of laughter on SpaghettiOs night. After that, she'd learned to shut up. Quit protesting her witchiness out loud. Quit denying she didn't know thing one about being a witch, and slowed her roll entirely. She'd gone along with all of it, as if she were a secret agent infiltrating the coven. Like some supernatural Sydney Bristow, pretending, listening, learning. And still she was baffled. How could she be a witch if neither of her parents were magically inclined? She certainly wasn't adopted. A theory she'd toyed with, but only momentarily. Both her parents were gone now, but there was no denying she was the spitting image of her mother, right down to her wide green eyes and strawberry blonde hair. Baba Yaga's voice droned back into earshot, making Bernie stand up straighter when she heard the word Paris. She was going to Paris to do her parole? She didn't know anyone in Paris. She didn't know anyone anywhere except in Boston. And she sure as hell didn't know French. As if it wasn't bad enough, she was a witch who didn't know how to be a witch. Now Baba and the Council of Spooky Goons were sending her to a foreign country? She'd better find her Sydney Bristow pants if she hoped to pull this one off. Texas. Baba finished with a smirk, her eyes gleaming. What did Paris have to do with Texas? If ever two words warred with each other. Bernie squeezed her temples and asked, Texas? Like y'all and George Strait? The connection between the two places just wasn't becoming clear. Ye and ho, mother fluffer! Baba Yaga shouted before she let her head fall back on her creamy shoulders and cackled. Wait, her mind said without aid of her mouth. She needed to clear up some things before she was sent off to Paris. Like, how long did parole last? Where would she live? Most importantly, who was going to keep her from robbing another bank? But Baba was clearly done talking. Lifting her arm high, as a wind out of nowhere whipped her hair and the lights flickered, Baba snapped her fingers. Chapter 2. Testicles. Big and sprinkled with sparse hair, testicles were swaying near her left eyeball. They were the first things Bernie saw when she opened her eyes. She'd landed flat on her ass and fallen backward, hitting the hard ground with a bone-rattling dump of limbs and pieces of cat hair she had to spit off her tongue. She flattened her palms against the surface she'd landed on to find it felt like grass. Sweet Susan! What the hell? A rush of oppressive heat wrapped around her face like a blanket as she lay there, too stunned to move. It coated her, swarming her skin, leaving beads of perspiration forming on her upper lip and forehead. Incoming! Fee fell smack on top of her with a yowl, right out of the sky and onto her face. Bernie spit out a wad of pink tulle and clenched her eyes shut, then popped them open again with a grunt. She moved her head to the side to dislodge Fee and looked up at the shadow hovering over her. The shadow with testicles. How did a set of testicles the size of oranges get in the middle of Paris? Paris had testicles just all out in the open like that? Of course Paris has testicles, nitwit. They have testicles galore. Testicles belong on men, and there are gobs of men in Paris. Yeah, but those don't look like testicles from a man. Furthermore, why are they hanging in my face in Paris? I know it's a pretty progressive place, but I didn't know everyone went rogue. There was no way to rationally reason this in her head. Instead, she opted for the, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist mantra. Maybe if I don't open my eyes, none of this is real. Bunny girl, you spent your entire sentence with your eyes closed. Open them and face the music, sugar lumps. Fee tickled her nose with his tail, using his paws to knead her hair. Morning, y'all, a soft voice murmured from above, the timbre deep and rich with southern tinges. A voice that sounded just like Lou Rawls. Holy shitballs of fire. Lou Rawls was here too? Bernie rolled to her side, her eyes wide open now. She grabbed Fee and pulled him close to her chest, her heart pounding so violently she heard it in her ears. Who was that, Fee? It was just me, ma'am. Bernie's breathing quickened, but no way was she looking up. Are the testicles talking, Fee? Please tell me the testicles don't sound like Lou Rawls and they aren't talking. Fee made a clucking noise while he struggled out of her grip. Can't do that. Where the hell are we, and why are there talking testicles involved? Her panic was taking on a new but familiar feel, much like the panic she'd experienced when the Boston PD had first arrested her after finding her in the bank vault of Boston First Mutual. Still, the Boston PD didn't have talking testicles. Well, not technically, maybe metaphorically. This created a whole other level of panic in the pit of her stomach. Bunny, baby, didn't you listen to anything Baba Yaga said? Fee finally came into focus, his dark fur sitting against a grassy backdrop with nothing but puffy white clouds above his head and the glare of the angry sun on his glittering tiara beneath. I heard you flew too long under the radar, Bernice, and something about Paris, blah, 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 and then Texas. Yep, that was about the gist of it. Fee fell back on his haunches and blinked at her. Hell, Bunny. You have to stop escaping to that place in your mind where this isn't all happening. Because newsflash, it's happening. Right here in Children of the Corn Country. And the testicles belong to a bull in a pasture that goes on for miles and miles with no freaking end in sight. A pasture? Okay, that connected with Texas for sure. And the bull talks? She winced at her question. Of course he talked. Cats talk and wear tutus, and witches exist, Bernice Sutton. He does, ma'am. The end quote, bull said, a hint of amusement in his tone. Why do the testicles, bull, sound like Lou Rawls? The bull chuckled, deep and resonant. That's a mighty fine compliment, pretty lady, but most folks just call me Biddy. Good to meet you. I'd offer you a hand up, but, well, you know, I'm all two left testicles. Ha! Fee squawked, jumping in the air and rolling to his back. The testicles made a funny. You know, left feet, testicles. I love it here already. Bernie shook her head, using the heels of her feet and hands to scoot backward. Talking bulls? Not funny, Fee. Fee rolled upright to rub up against her side. Okay, cool your jets. I hear hysteria in your voice, and it reminds me that I forget sometimes you're still not used to our world, where crazy shit happens every day. So let's talk this out. She sucked in air that felt as though it had just escaped an oven. Talk me down, Fee. Hurry, before I pass out. Did you even hear the terms of your parole, Bernie girl? She pulled her legs close to her chest and let her chin rest on her knees with a sheepish gaze focused solely on Fee. She wasn't ready to look at Biddy just yet. Well, not all of it. You heard none of it, Fee admonished. Bernie let her head hang in shame. Guilt be my name. You're right. I heard none of it. So, what happens next? Fee turned his back on her and began weaving in and out of Biddy's legs. So, he...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?